at, you remember that yesterday we wrote a delete function? So I wrote it there, I gave it to you, I posted it. Anybody open the code and try to put it in the right place to make it work? You didn't have to, but it was a good exercise. So we have the function to delete. Remember we tested it yesterday and it was working. So now I'm going to show you how I would just put it in the right place and make sure that it happens when we press the X. Right? So let's start with that. That's a nice refresher. So this is a fetch request. We need to make it a specific ID. So when I call delete book, I'll have to call it with a specific ID in mind of the book that I'm trying to get rid of. That will happen. I need to specify that the method is delete, right? Because otherwise, what does fetch default to? Get. Great. So the function is written. All I need to do now is go and find out where I can call it. So in this case, if we take a look here, the way we wrote the app is when I'm adding a book, I'm also adding an event listener to delete the book, right? So this listener here is listening for whenever I click that X. And it's currently just removing the row on the page, right? But I actually wanted to remove the row on the page and the book on the database. Otherwise, right now what happens is, if I take a look at my app, yep, it's deleting things, but every time I refresh, they're all back. So the simplest way is just as easy as, okay, remove the thing, and also delete a book. And now I need to pass the ID of the book. Right? But if you think about it, do we have access to our book in this scope? If we look at it here, do we have access to it here? There is no book here, right? But because we wrote this function, where's this function written? Inside this other one, right? So if we look outside, do we actually have access to the book? Right? So this is something called scope and closures in particular. So because I wrote this function here, when this function was attached to my element, it was attached with access to this book that I have here, which means that I can actually refer to my book and it will keep access to this book forever. So I can just do it this way, and now that the listener has been added to the element, the listener will remember that, okay, this is the book that's in memory. I can see it and I can use the ID. Right? This event, this function that I wrote here, will have access to that book there forever. So just by doing that, again, I don't want to actually delete everything yet, so I'm going to copy this. But you should see that when I click, if I press the network tab also, network tab is great to get feedback on every request that you're making. See if you're making the right request and see if it's actually coming back with a good response, if it's valid, if it worked. So let me clear this, and now when I press X, if it worked, what do I expect to see there on the right? A delete request. I see two requests. If I take a look at the first one is an options request that I never asked for this. But browsers, this is something that the browser does for you. You don't need to worry too much about. But what the browser is doing here is, before it even makes a delete request, it's checking with the server, saying, hey, can I make a delete request? So it's asking for my options. What are my options? What can I actually do? And the server is responding, well, these are the methods that you can do. You can get, head, put, patch, post, delete. So now it knows, hey, great, I can delete. So head is the kind of get, but without getting any body. It just gets the top of the request. It's when you don't want to get any actual information, you just want to get if the request worked or not. Like, was it a 200 or something? It's very rarely used. You don't need to worry much about it. You won't see it in the course or the challenge or at any point. But it's a simpler get request. It's a more efficient one when you don't want extra stuff. Cool. So yeah, so now the browser knows that it can send a delete request because it's there. And it actually, okay, I'll go ahead and actually send the delete request that the user wanted me to send. So now it sends it. This is the actual request that we wanted to send. And you can see it was a delete request made to book 1. So the right ID is there. We get back a 200. So it is an actual delete request. And we get back a 200 saying the server is telling us it worked. I did it. If I check, there is no response. So the server responds with something empty because there's nothing to respond with. A better API, which we may write, might actually give us back a little message saying successfully deleted book, right? Something like this. But it's okay if it didn't. We know it's a 200. We know that it worked. So now when I refresh the page, what do I expect to see? Yeah. So now that book is actually gone forever, right? It's gone for good. If I check my database, you can see that book 1 is gone. So we start with 2 and 3. I'm going to add it manually here, right? Because in this particular database, it's just a file, so I can add it back in. So I just copy-pasted what I had before to add the book 1. So otherwise, we're going to run out of books. So now if I refresh the page, you can see, because I added it manually there to my database, when I refresh the page, now it's back there again. But it's only because I manually typed it in. Cool? Great, so that pretty much sums up what we were doing. A quick recap of what we did yesterday, right? So the GET request. This is the most typical kind of request, right? You're trying to get information. You don't need to specify the GET request because that's the default. And this is working. This is actually what we're doing at the beginning of the page. Every time we load the page, we're making a GET request first because our page doesn't store any actual books. All the books are stored in my database. So every time the page loads, every time I refresh, the first thing my app needs to do is go get the books from the database, put them on the page. So the request we wrote was a fetch. Do you remember what fetch returns? Promise. Remember what's in the promise? It's a response. So it's not my data yet because I haven't parsed it. But I do get a response. So I can then open the promise with them. And I can work with my response. And then I get a response. And .json is saying, hey, I know this response has JSON in there. Parse it for me. I want the actual data. I want the JavaScript. You said you can do more than one line of code after the right? Yeah. Why do we need 2 thens then? And not after the response and after changing it to JSON, the next thing we want to do instead of another then? So there's a couple of reasons. One is a bit more complex. It's that this method in itself, the JSON method, returns an actual promise inside the promise. So we don't need to worry about it. If we wanted to do it in here, it wouldn't work because let's say that I want to do this, but I don't want to confuse you too much. Let's say that I want to do more stuff inside this function, right? The problem is this method actually doesn't return my data, it returns a promise. So if I store this here, I would think this is my data, but it's not. It's actually a promise with my data inside. So the .then takes care of that for me, and it will flatten the promises until we just have one single promise. So that's quite clever. But the other reason, even more compelling, is I don't want my getbooks to do too much. Right? I call this getbooks. I wanted to just get books. I want it to stop at the point at which I have a promise with the books. Because then anywhere else in my app, I can go ahead and I can say get books and then do something with the books. Right? So it makes it more versatile. Because if I did everything in just the get books, well, first of all, it's misleading because it's called get books, and it would be getting books and rendering books and doing more stuff with books. Right? So it's always about the single responsibility principle as well. Try to split functions in ways that they only do one thing and that they do it well. And think about it like Lego pieces, right? You want to be able to have tiny Lego pieces in different shapes and sizes so you can then put them together in different ways to build software. So every function is a Lego piece. We want to make sure that we have nice little pieces in there that we can put together in different ways. Cool? Any questions about get and delete so far? Yeah. Sure. So, what does this function return right now? It returns a promise, right? It returns basically this whole thing, which is going to be a promise with my data inside. And because it returns that promise, I can now do get books and then, right? Because the then, I can only call the then on promises. Now, what does this function return? It's not like Ruby, right? So in a regular function like this, unless we say return, the function returns nothing. Yeah, in this kind of functions, yeah. We talked about arrow functions can be a little different, but regular functions, you always have to type the return keyword. Because otherwise it returns undefined. And then if I look at this is not going to work because I'm trying to do undefined.then. Doesn't make sense, it won't work. And if I try it, you can see that it should probably say .then is not a method of undefined when I refresh the page. You want to turn this into an arrow function, or? You don't have to. You don't need it. It's just refactoring, right? If you want to try different syntax. But my main concern for me is not, you should be able to do this in 10 different ways. No, you should be able to do it right, at least in one way. And once you get really good and you understood the one way, then you can start experimenting. You can try other things. But I don't want to start confusing you and throwing arrow syntax everywhere because it will get a bit messy if you don't know. Yeah.
If you console that on line 57, you can't take it off.
If I console that,
Yeah.
no, it won't take it down. You will just put it in the put it in the console. Which one? We can take a look at the quiz. Yeah. Yeah, sure. If I wanted to do everything in here, I could put another .then and then I don't need to return it because I don't care about the return value. But in this case, the return value is very important because I will call getBooks to get back a promise with the data inside. So yeah, that's right. Right, so this way seems to be, well, this is what I would call best practice, right? So have a function that returns the promise with the data you want. So we get the best of both worlds. We don't have to start, like, keep typing fetch and parse and do all this stuff. Anytime now in my app, I can say getBooks, then do something. So the then is still taking care of the asynchronicity, right? Because this thing here, when will it happen? Once everything is done, right? Which, how many seconds is that going to take? I don't know. Could be 1 second, could be 20, could be 5, could be 100 milliseconds, could be never. Right? Could be that the server breaks and this never actually happens. So the .then is taking care of that for us. I will only do this when it's ready, if it's ready. I promise. Cool? All right, so now let's move on. And let's move on to the actual creation of books. Right, so far we dealt with getting books, deleting books, and we need to create. So again, this is similar. What kind of operations am I performing? Does it remind you of database when we did SQL and stuff? What kind of operations do we have? Do you remember the acronym? So far we've done reading, which is get, finding stuff, and we've done deleting. Right? So let's take a look at creating and updating. So to create a book, the server that I'm running, right? I'm running the same server as yesterday. You remember the JSON server? I'm just running that server, right? And this is basically a server that's very easy for me to use. In one line, I just press enter and it creates a database and it handles all these requests. Tomorrow we will actually see how we build our own server with Rails, which is way more exciting. And it's the actual proper way of doing it. But JSON server is great for experimenting, and that's what we're doing now. We're prototyping, trying stuff out, practicing fetch. So I'm going to create a book. What kind of requests do I need to make to create something? It will be post, right? So reading is get, deleting is delete, creating is post. So let's take a look at it first by itself, and then we'll put it in a function that we can use. So just the syntax for now. We need to fetch. What are we going to need? What's the next bit? Yeah, the URL of what? Is it just this one? Is that going to work if I do this? Yeah. So the URL of the resource that I'm trying to create, right? In this case, I'm trying to create books. So it will be books. You might be creating users, images, posts, blogs, whatever, right? So in this case, this database has books. I'm trying to create a book. So it's going to be a post request to the books URL. Can I stop there? What would this do if I stop there? If I, let's say that I'm going to get my response, right? I'm going to say response to this. I'm going to parse it. What will I get if I press enter now? We're making a get request. We're getting the books, right? Because fetch defaults to getting things. So how do I fix this? How do I make it so I can actually create something using this fetch? So it means we need to actually use this extra options parameter that we used before. You remember what the extra options looks like? What's the data type of my options? Is that a string or an array? What do I put in here? Add method, but can I just use method like this? It was a hash. Yep. Yep, but to change the method, the second thing is always an object, right? So we call them hashes in Ruby, and the JavaScript lingo for hashes is objects, right? Not objects as in object-oriented in classes, but this is a kind of object. Cool? So the method was actually in here. The method is the key of this object. Right, so before we did delete. So to make it cleaner, I would go here, put this there, put that there, right? But you see that this is the first argument. The first argument is a string. This is the second argument. The second argument is an object. I don't have to put these two things in line here. So I'm choosing to put the arguments in line, in the same place. I could move this away and put these things in their own variables, right? So I can say URL equals that, and let's call it options equals that, right? Same thing. And now instead of passing things directly, I can just pass the URL and the option, right? So what matters is you need to understand this is just create with my URL. This is an object that can have some options. So before we looked at method, and that's all we needed because we were trying to make a delete request. What's different about making a post request? What's different between a delete request and a post request? Conceptually. So we create. We'll take info from the user, we'll create something. So we need to post. And when we post, if I just say post, right? Let's change it to post. Is that it? Does the server know what we're creating? So we need to somehow send information, right? So the difference between a delete request and a post request, the difference between post and get. When we get, we don't send anything, we just ask things. When we post, well, the server needs to know what do you want to create? I know you're trying to create a book, but you haven't told me the title, you haven't told me the year, and you haven't told me the description. How can I guess that, right? You can't guess it. So posting means we will have to actually send some information along with the request. Yeah? Now to send information, first thing is we need to tell the server what language will I be talking to you in, right? So what language is the server talking to us when it sends us information? JSON. What language will we talk to when we send information? JSON as well. Yeah. So the client and the server can talk to each other. The client might be written in JavaScript, and the server might be written in JavaScript or in Ruby or in C#. It doesn't matter. It's a black box. What matters is that when they talk to each other, they talk JSON. Right? Imagine that I'm from Argentina, I speak Spanish, and there's someone from China, and they want to talk to me. And if they talk to me in Chinese and I talk to them in Spanish, we're not going to go very far. But if we choose to speak English, right, then we will understand each other. So I will give her a message in English. She will parse it into Chinese in her head, understand it, give me a message back in English, and then I will parse it into Spanish in my head, right? So JSON is the common language of the internet. This is what we use to send and receive messages. So now we need to tell the server, I will talk to you in JSON. Because JSON is not the only language we could talk to it in. We could be sending HTML, XML, there's lots of different options. So we need to tell the server, hey, I'm going to talk to you in JSON. Right? So to do that, we need to send some information about the request itself. Right? It's called metadata. Information about the request. And we do that in a little object called headers. Right? So headers is extra info about my request. Some more details about what I'm sending. So remember the shape, right? So the whole options name is an object. The method is string. The headers is another object with some extra info that we want to do. Now, what I need to say is, I need to tell you the type of the content that I'm going to be sending, right? So I told you that I'm sending you a message, but you don't know if I'm going to talk to you in English, in Chinese, or in Russian, right? So I need to say, I will actually talk to you in JSON, right? And you have to remember the syntax. This is how you write it. And now, okay, I'll tell the server that I'm making a post request. So I'm trying to create something. I told the server that I'm going to talk to it in JSON. That's great. What's missing? We're missing the data, right? The JSON that we're trying to send. I said, I'm creating something. I'll talk to you in JSON. And then I say nothing. So we actually need to send data in JSON format. Right? And the data goes in the body of the request. So this is, we have three things, right? Option, we have method, headers, and body. Method tells what kind of request I'm making. Headers is what language I'm talking to you in. And the body is the data that I'm trying to send. Right? You remember what kind of data we need to send to it? Yeah, it's JSON, but what stuff? What will be in the JSON? Title, description, and year. Right? My server needs that to create a book. What is JSON? So, is this JSON? Is that JSON or JavaScript? So what's the difference between JSON and JavaScript? They look quite similar. What's the difference between HTML and the DOM? When we get HTML, what's the format we get it in? It's a string. And then we turn it into the DOM. When we get JSON, what are we getting? A string. And then we turn it into JavaScript. So what is that below? JavaScript or JSON? How would I turn it into JSON? I need to stringify it, right? I need to turn it into a string. So let's say that I want to do this here. Title, Lord of the Rings, description, long, and year, 19. We said 54? Cool. If I did this, would that be correct? I told you I'm sending you JSON. What am I actually sending? JavaScript? So is it valid? Let's try it. It fails. It's saying it's not really valid. It looks valid, almost, but JSON is actually a string. So let's find out what's the easiest way to get that done. I could manually just say, okay, let's actually give you a string. And we could say valid JSON. Remember, it has to have double quotes, all the keys and stuff, so we can say title. But okay, now we have issues because these double quotes are inside quotes, so maybe we can change that. And we can say that, and now this is another string, and we can say Lord of the Rings. Yeah? That looks like valid JSON now, doesn't it? It's missing some info, but it looks okay. If I send it, oh, it's just telling me that URL has already been declared, and options probably already declared too. So let's refresh the page for a minute. That's because I used the const keyword, right? You cannot declare things twice when you declare it with const. So I'm not going to use const so we can keep reusing this. Remember I told you that in the console I like not putting let or const, so I can just reuse the same code over and over when I'm trying stuff out. Great. Let's try it again. No errors. Seems like it did something. Let me check the database. It's there. It created it, and I didn't give it a description or a year, but the information was sent, right? It was received. It worked. Yeah, we don't have validation. We could have said, hey, you're missing a description and stuff. But it did work. And if I refresh my page now, what will I see? Yeah? I have a book that's not complete, but so I get undefined and undefined, but the book is working. The row is showing, there's an X, everything's fine. So that works, but I don't want to have to write this manually every time. I don't want to have to write my own string, right? Do you remember what we did back in Mod 1 when we were looking at hashes and the internet and Ruby? Remember we had a library called JSON? So we could say JSON parse when we were getting back a response. So we actually have the same library in JavaScript. So we have access to JSON. We don't even need to install it. It's just available to us built in. And if I type JSON, you can see that JSON is this object that has a parse function and a stringify function. That means that, let me copy this. If I say parse, and I pass it some string that's valid JSON, it will parse it to JavaScript. And if I say stringify, and I pass you an object, it will stringify it. Right, so we don't need to do this manually. There's a tool there to do it for us. Yeah, because the console representing the quotes is fine. If you wrote that manually, it wouldn't work because these quotes would be anything that's out. Remember when we did it in Ruby, it was showing everything with escapes, with the little slashes everywhere? The console just doesn't show the slashes. But that's basically a string. If I tried to do this manually, it wouldn't work because you can see that the string starts here, ends there. I will need to turn this into... But when I press enter, you can see that the console represents that as double quotes. Cool, but now it worked. So now, let's go back here for a minute. Let me get rid of the URL const here. Cool. How do we fix this to make it work? Because it wasn't working before, because we're sending JavaScript. How do we make it so we're actually sending JSON? The same thing we did there, right? So what's the easiest way? Where do we put that? Right? We put it right here. So we can wrap all of this stuff with JSON string. JSON stringify this whole thing. And it's getting a bit long, so I'm just going to move this down. There you go. So the body of my request will be a JSON string, right? I am stringifying all of this. So let's try that again. What do you expect will happen now? We'll create a book, and it should have all of these things, right? Let's check it out. What came back? What's this promise? What do you think? If I open that, what will I see inside? So I'm still making fetch requests, right? Every time you make any kind of request, doesn't have to be get. The server can respond. In this case, I told it to create something, and the server responded, what do you think it's going to be back? Will be sensible. It's going to be back. Could be the ID. Maybe the whole thing, the whole book. Right? So I sent it a string with the title, description, and name. Then I did the first request, and then I parsed the response because the server sends me back some JSON in return, right? A message. And let's see what's in there. It's an object. And if I open it, hey, look. The server responded saying, hey, I created the book, here it is. Right? What's different about this book? The order doesn't matter in hashes because it's just keys and values. So don't worry about the order. This one has an ID, right? So I know for a fact that the server stored it in the database created an ID for it, and now it gave it back to me. So now I can see that this is a server book, right? I know it's on the server, and I know the number of the ID. Cool? Sorry? Why is it not here? We haven't refreshed the page, right? This is not automatic. The only point in when I'm getting books from the server is at the start of the app. So right now, if I created a book, I have two choices. I can either refresh my page, which is something that generally we don't want to do because we're trying to build an SPA, right? It's a single page app. So what do you think is the way to do it? What would be the right thing to do in an SPA? We can do a .then, and then when we get the book back, we had a function, right, to add books to the page. So call that. So you have to manually add it to the page when it comes back. This is the way. What are you looking for, Xavi? But this is, you're trying to fight the nature of the application. Because I'm saying, I want to create a book. And I can only put the book on the page once the book comes back. Right? So I'm going to say, create the book. And then add the book to the page. That seems like a fairly sensible way to do it. You could also create the book and also put it on the page before it comes back from the server. But what's going to be the problem with that? Like, if I try to create the book, right? Imagine that I'm getting my input from my user. So once the user types the input, once the user types the title and they type the description and the year, I have enough information, right, to put the book on the page. But is there something that I don't have? I don't know if I managed to actually create my book on the server, and I also don't know what about the book. The ID of the book. So what would break if I do that? What do you think? Do I need the ID here for anything? For deleting? Right? Because when we create the book, remember what we said? When we create the book, we said, okay, this button is actually going to send a request to books / the ID of the book. And if I add a book that has no ID, that's going to break. So the most sensible thing to do here would be send a request to the server, wait for it to work, to do its thing, and when it comes back, when the book is ready, and when I know the ID, put the book on the page with the valid ID and everything. Right? So I don't want to have to keep repeating this here. I don't want to have to type all of this stuff, right? It's getting really long. So what am I going to do to make this reusable? Turn it into a function. Right, so let's turn this into a function very quickly. In fact, let's take a 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we're going to do that. So now I refresh the page and I can see these are all the books that I created. But I had to actually refresh the page to make that work, right? And the point is I don't want to have to do it. Because we created the delete function, we should be able now to just click, and those extra books are gone forever because we are deleting them from the database as well. Remember we wrote the delete request. So let's go back here. We said we wanted to turn this into a function so we don't have to keep manually typing all the stuff, right? So the answer to that question is, how do I not make this repetitive? Is write a function. So we're going to write a function. Let's call it create book. What information do you think it should take? It should probably take that, right? So I have two options. Remember what we did the first time? We had a function to put a book on the page. Initially, it was taking things separate, right? It was taking a title and a description, and the third argument was the year. And we said there's a better way, right? What was the way? When we rewrote this function here. What does this function take right now, the add book function? It takes a book, which is really an object, right? Where the title and the description and stuff. So then we can read the title, and we can read the description, and we can read the ID and the year, right? So let's do it the same way. So the simplest way to do it is actually, instead of having to pass a title, I could do it this way. I could pass a title, a description, and a year, and then what do I need to change here to make it work? I need to basically put everything where it belongs, right? So the title goes here. That's the title I get from there. The description goes here. And the year goes here. Right? But what's a better way? I could pass in all this object. Right? What if my argument was an object that has title, description, and year? That would be easier. Right? So instead of passing this thing separately, what if I pass an object that I'm going to call book? How do I change this now to make it work? You would do what, book title like this? I mean, you can do it this way. It would work. But there's a shortcut. We can do better. No? What is book? What is book? It will be an object. What's in the object? It will have title, description, and year. What is this that I'm selecting right now? It's an object. What keys does it have? Title, description, year. So the book will be the same thing. It's the same shape, right? It's an object with, they'll have a title, a description, and a year. If I stringify it, that's it. I don't need to be putting things individually. I could just pass the whole book. Do I need an ID when I'm creating? No. The book that comes back will have an ID. The book that I send doesn't need an ID. Because the whole purpose of creating is that the database will give it an ID later on. Now I can put constant here because I'm in a function, so that's fine. Cool, so you can see that we're doing the same stuff we were doing before. Now it's a function. I don't have to keep typing everything. I create the function, and now how do I make this work? How do I create a new book here in the console? Calling a function, what with? What is the argument? A book, what is a book? It's an object, right? It's an object with title, description, and year. So I can type in any title. Great. I go back undefined. But maybe it worked anyway. How would I check if it worked? I can refresh the page. What's another way of checking if it worked? Check the database. Another way? I could do .then, but it's too late because I already called this function. I could give it a return value so I can see that the promise comes back, right? And now because I forgot it, that's not an option right now, right? Because this book's already been created. I can fix it for next time. But right now, I could also check the network tab. Remember the network tab has every request that we make? It keeps a log of these requests. So if I check the network tab, look. You made a post request to books. And it worked. How do I see what came back? Well, I can just check response. Right, so the network tab is pretty useful when you're dealing with fetch requests to debug your application. In fact, when you're making a post request, you're actually sending some data, right? So you can also check that you're actually sending the right data to the server by scrolling down. Well, first of all, do you see a familiar thing here that we wrote? The content type. The content type is there because we wrote it. Because we put it in those headers, right? We made that. And then if we keep scrolling, look at that. I can actually see everything that I sent to the server. And this is useful because sometimes I might make a mistake and I might be trying to send undefined or missing keys or something. So it's great to check this tab and scroll down to see if I'm actually sending the stuff that I think I'm sending. Because sometimes you might be referring to a variable that you think has a string, but maybe it doesn't, so you're sending undefined, or there will be bugs. And this is a good way to check and debug that. Cool. So now that I know that it worked, what am I expecting to happen when I refresh this page? The book is there. I don't want to have to wait until the page refreshes, though. The whole point of an SPA is to do it there and then. So, okay, first of all, I realized that my create book is actually returning undefined. So that's not good. So how do I fix it? How do I fix this function? Because right now the function returns undefined. I need to put return right before fetch. Cool. What will return? The promise with the new book, right? Because we're already parsing the book. So this line, if I stop here, what would this function return? We return a promise with a response. Because I do this, now this function returns a promise with the book. Because I'm parsing it here. So what comes back is the result of all of this. Right, so promise with the book. So let's change it like that. Let's create the same book again. Now what can I do? Well, first, if I press enter, I get a promise. If I click on it, It's got my book. Do we have a function that takes a single book and adds it to the page? Yeah, we call it add book, remember? Yeah. So we can say create book, and then when the book comes back, this is a function that takes the book, and what do we do with the book? We have a function that is expecting add book to receive a book, and it will add it to the page. Right, so by doing that, we're using JavaScript to dynamically add my book to the page without having to wait until I refresh the page and do all that stuff again. So what's going to happen when I press enter? Let's call it cool 2, grade 2, 222. What do I expect? Press enter, what do I see? Right, so you see the order of things? We already had a function to add books to the page. That's the client side that was working. Now we added the functionality of creating books on the server side. So we had a function that creates books on the server and gives me back a book object. And we have a function that is waiting for a book object and it puts it on the server, on the page. So we say create the book on the server, and then when the book is ready, add the book to the page. Yeah. I could, but I don't want to. For the same reason that I didn't do the get, right? So I want to make sure that creating books only does one thing. So it would work. Yeah, so it's creating and it's also adding to the page. So if I added the add to the page, now it's not doing one thing, it's doing two. So I want to keep things separate. What if I want to create books and instead of adding them to the page, I want to do something completely different? I want to create the book and then put it in the console. I want to create the book and then send it to a friend in an SMS message. Right? So creating books this way, the way we wrote it, stops at the creation part. And what happens after, you get to choose. Yeah?
So, my not quite clear yet on the flow, but now you've got a promise.
Yeah.
Like in the very end, you've got a promise. Is that the return value of the last then that you made, or?
Yeah.
So what is that like?
Depends. What does this return? Does it return it or does it just put it on the page? What does this function return? If I look at this function. Does the function return anything though? It puts it on the page, but does it return anything? So the return value is undefined. So the next promise will be undefined. So if I check what's in here, it's undefined. So the value of the next promise always depends on the return of the previous one. This then adds the book to the page but doesn't return anything. So even though I get a next promise, the promise has nothing in it.
So the promise is what it returns, right? So actually it has some, it does return something. It's just that
It returns undefined. Because add book returns undefined. Right, so you have to think about what does this function return? Nothing, so we get nothing. At this point, we don't care anymore because we've done what we wanted. We added the stuff to the page, so we don't need to work. There's nothing we want to do then. That was the final then in this case. So we don't need to care. It's okay that it doesn't return anything. If you want to, you can return something else, but you don't have to at this point. So let's make this happen quickly in my app. So I'm going to just bring this together with the rest of my functions. So I had one to create and delete, so read and delete. This one, create a book on the server. So this is my function to create the book on the server. Right? Now let's make this work in the actual UI so the user can do this. Because so far we're doing it in the console. So the last step is actually, let's plug this into my app. Right? When do I want to actually create a book on the server? If I look at my app, at what point do I need to create a book on my server? When I submit the form. Right? So let's go back to the code. I know that this is the syntax that I need to use to create a book and then add it to the page, right? So I'm going to copy this to make things a bit easier. Let's find, so now we need to find the submit. You see it? Here. So I know this is the when, right? When do I want to create a book? In here, in the submission, on submit. When are we adding books to the page? Which line? 36, right? This line here. Because we did some checking, so let's check if the title is longer than the stuff. So here we're saying, okay, I'm happy with this, let's add the book to the page. But we're only just adding it to the page. Right? So we change it so we add it to the server and then to the page. So we substitute this line with what I had before, which is okay. The problem is add book is waiting for the whole book, right? So we forgot to change this before. But create book is expecting an entire book. So the way I would do this is instead of, you know, we have these three things separately here. It would be nice to actually have them in an object, so we can pass that object. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to actually turn it into a book object. It's going to have everything except an ID. So it's going to have all these three things. It's going to have a title, description, and year. And now all I'm doing is just changing this to object syntax, right? So keys and values. And comments. And then. So instead of saying create the title variable, and the description variable, and the year variable, I'm saying create a book object that has a title key, which is whatever is in here, that has a description key, which is whatever is in there, and a year key, which is whatever is in there. I have a tiny problem, and I need to update this. This shouldn't be called text anymore. It should be description. So I need to make sure that my data is correct. You have plenty of time to practice this, don't worry. But now look, now I have a book. Isn't that what this create book function wanted? It is. So we can just pass it down. And then when we get a book back from the server, we put it on the page. Look good? What book is this referring to? Because this is called book, this is called book. So this book is actually that book. Why? Why is this book and not this book? It exists. It exists. It's the scope that exists. But it's the first step. Exactly. It's about, imagine that when you see the word book written here, you start to look at it. I start saying, okay, what is the closest book variable that I can find? Right? So if you look for a book here, what is the closest book that you can find? That. So if I call this something else, like book 2, what book is this now? Now this actually looks, if it's looking for a book, it says, what's the closest one I can find? No, this is book Right, so it's a lookup.
Why did it convert here?
Because this is not a variable defined. This is an argument that I'm passing. Right, so this is a definition of the parameter. This is a definition of the verb. This is not a definition. This is passing. That's it. Cool, and let's see if that works. So we should be able to refresh the page, add some stuff in here, and when I press create, let's take a look at the network tab, press create. Why is it taking so long? I think I didn't refresh the page maybe. Let's try again. Ah, title. Let's go back. What's wrong? Aha. Well spotted. Title doesn't exist anymore. It's book.title. So be careful with that, and you always have to read the console. Because if you don't take a look at the console, it may look like what the hell is going on. But if you read the console, when this error happens, whatever was after this code is not going to happen because this crashed my script already. It's like, no, I'm not going to go any further. There was an error. Right? So read the console. Always keep the console open. It's very important. And now if I refresh and try again, great. It added the book below. And if I check my network tab, it also added the book to my server. So if I go and check my database, the book is actually being added here as well. And we spent a bit more time covering this. We didn't cover an update request, but we don't really have to. Because if you think about it, what would be different about an update request? So how would we turn this into an update, a valid update request? The method needs to be patch. So we change it to patch. Are we sending some information over? Yeah. So we still need the headers. We're still sending JSON. We still need to pass a body with what we're changing. Alright? And there's one more thing to change instead. The ID. Where do we need to put the ID? The ID goes here. So if I get a book that has an ID, then I can just say book ID. I can call this update book. That's it. This is valid. Right? So if you know how to post, patching is going to be very, very similar. So it's about getting used to the posting syntax, right? And the headers and the body and all that stuff. Let's check that this works. And then we're done. So I should be able to call update book now. How do I update the book? What's the object I need to pass to it? It needs to have the ID. So let's say I'm trying to update book number 6. It should be one of the ones at the bottom. I don't want to change the Harry Potter books. And I want to change the title to something like potato. Right? Let's see what happens. And if I refresh the page, that's now potato. Cool. I'll put this in the code when I upload it anyway, so you'll have that. Thank you very much. You can do it, it would still work, but the only requirement is for the content type. So content type is what I'm sending to you. Accept is what I'm expecting, what I'm accepting when you send to me. And we can accept it, yeah. It's accepted by default, so it's okay. No. Cool. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. What are they referencing? I'm not sure. In the request, you mean? Or where? Whatever I type in here is the content of the request that the server will receive. So this is what the server will see when it receives my request. So the server will receive a request from the client, and the request is going to have a body. Right? So it's not for us, it's for the server to see on the other side. So tomorrow you will see how, when we create our own API, this stuff that we just sent, we're going to get on the other side. Cool. Thank you.